We've got the light of freedom. We're gonna let it shine. We've got the light of freedom, and we're gonna let it shine. We've got the light of freedom. We're gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere we go, we're gonna let it shine. Everywhere we go, we're gonna let it shine. Everywhere we go, we're gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere we go, gotta let your little light shine. Everywhere you go, gotta let your little light shine. Everywhere you go, gotta let your little light shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Good afternoon and welcome to the North Carolina Humanities Council presentation of the John Tyler Caldwell Award for the Humanities. I am Sherry Paula Watkins, Executive Director and your MC for today's ceremony. A big thank you to Mary Williams for kicking off this special event. Your music, Mary, was the perfect way to start our award ceremony. Today, we are happy to celebrate our 2020 John Tyler Caldwell Award for the Humanities honoree, Dr. James W. Clark, Jr. Over the next hour, you will hear music, special remarks from many of Dr. Clark's colleagues, and the delivery of the annual Caldwell Lecture. We know that many of you consider Dr. Clark a role model, friend, and mentor. We are so pleased to honor him for his many achievements and accomplishments that have fulfilled a lifelong commitment to education and leadership. First, I'd like to take this moment to recognize our sponsors, supporters that have helped make this event possible. We thank each and every one of you for affirming your belief in the importance of the humanities and for showing your support for Dr. Clark and the North Carolina Humanities Council. Throughout the program, we encourage you to engage and connect with others by utilizing the chat features. You can chat with me, our speakers, send notes to your friends, find important information about us. Some of you may have already responded if you logged in early, but I invite you to type in the chat box where you are viewing from today. While you try out our chat features, I want to again say thank you for joining us. Regardless if this is your first, 5th, or 30th time attending, we welcome you and thank you for being here. For the next few minutes, I want to share about the North Carolina Humanities Council and who we are. We are one of 55 state councils located within each state and territory of the U.S. The North Carolina Humanities Council is your statewide nonprofit, an affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. We were created almost 50 years ago to ensure that public humanities thrive in North Carolina, and we continue to work today by spurring dialogue, creating opportunity, to deepen our connections and strengthen our statewide community. Since 1990, the North Carolina Humanities Council has awarded the John Tyler Caldwell Award for the Humanities to exceptional individuals who have strengthened the educational, cultural, and civic life of North Carolinians. The award is named for its first recipient and founding member of the North Carolina Humanities Council, the late Dr. John Tyler Caldwell. You will hear from many others today about Dr. Clark's accolades, and I offer this one to start. Dr. Clark has championed and contributed to North Carolina's rich literary and cultural heritage for nearly 6 decades. He is English Professor Emeritus at North Carolina State University, where he served on the faculty for almost 40 years. During Dr. Clark's first decade at NC State, his chancellor and mentor was Dr. John Tyler Caldwell. How terrific it is when life comes full circle in such a meaningful way. This celebration of the Caldwell Award is a reminder of the power of individuals who live, serve, and teach with the humanities' core set of values and lead with strength. Today's celebration of such an individual, Dr. James Clark, provides us all hope and inspiration during these times. On this momentous 30th anniversary of the Caldwell Award, I wish I could be shaking hands and greeting you as you walked into our ceremony. But as you know, the way in which we connect and talk to one another has drastically changed. As our lives continue to be impacted by COVID-19, we're also grappling with how to confront the realities of discrimination in this country. As we watch the nightly news and read our Twitter feeds, we are wrestling with what actions we can take and how to ensure a better future for all. Empathy, understanding, and respect are needed, particularly now. The North Carolina Humanities Council is fostering these values through our day-to-day work during this pandemic. We have come together with our board, staff, communities, leaders, and partners with sleeves rolled up to forge paths and seize new opportunities. In July, the North Carolina Humanities Council distributed over $630,000 of CARES Act funding through our NC CARES Humanities Relief Grants. With these emergency COVID-19 relief funds, we supported 60 museums, libraries, historical societies, and other cultural organizations across North Carolina. In addition to these grants, we also are offering North Carolinians the chance to participate in a statewide read of 2 novels, The Water Knife and Dry. Our statewide read is estimated to engage thousands of North Carolinians in common conversation through online and limited in-person discussion groups. Due to the pandemic, we've also adapted how people engage with one of our most popular programs, our Smithsonian Museum on Main Street tour. This year, we're touring waterways in 6 towns: Franklin, Wake Forest, Washington, Wrightsville Beach, Graham, and Burnsville. Community exhibit sites are taking precautions to ensure the safety of attendees and are offering new virtual programming about what water means culturally, socially, and spiritually. As you can see, our work illuminates the power of the humanities, community creativity, and the resiliency of the people of North Carolina. It is in this spirit that we are delighted to present the 2020 Caldwell Award to Dr. Clark, a man who has dedicated himself and his career to the humanities. Coming up next on our program, you will hear the 2020 Caldwell Lecture. As per the tradition of our Caldwell Award ceremonies, the selected Caldwell laureate chooses a speaker to deliver the Caldwell Lecture. This year, we're delighted that Dr. James Clark chose Christy Henson Norris. Please let me introduce Christy before she begins her lecture. Christy Norris serves as the director of Carolina K-12, a program of Carolina Public Humanities at UNC Chapel Hill. This program works to extend the resources of the university to serve North Carolina's K-12 educators in each of the state's 100 counties. Christy designs and facilitates professional development programs, writes curriculum, and collaborates with partner organizations all around the state to help maximize the support of teachers and public education throughout North Carolina, regardless of social or economic challenges. In this work, Dr. Clark has been one of her greatest partners, collaborators, and supporters. As president of the North Caroliniana Society, Jim and the Society have partnered with Carolina K-12 in delivering the annual William Friday Teacher Retreats, which provide top-notch scholarly and experiential retreats around the state for our hardworking teachers. To date, because of Dr. Clark and the Society's support, this one initiative has provided 7 retreats, serving over 200 teachers and directly over 30,000 students annually in 74 of North Carolina's counties. Christy is also the 2020 recipient of the Robert E. Bryan Public Service Award for her design and work on the Teaching Hard History Initiative, which encourages and trains educators to teach about our nation's comprehensive shared past and engage in civil discourse around controversial current events. In everything she does, she dedicates herself to supporting and affirming K-12 teachers as the honored professionals they are. Without further ado, here is Christy Henson Norris to present the 2020 Caldwell Lecture she has titled, Teaching the Darkness Away, Humanities, History, and Education.
Thank you, Sherry Paula, and thanks to the North Carolina Humanities Council for inviting me to present the Caldwell Lecture this year. It is truly my honor to be here and to celebrate the incredible career of Dr. Jim Clark, who is someone I have deep appreciation, respect, and admiration for. Whether through his support of K-12 teachers in every county of this state, or of youth development through the 4-H program, or in the classroom himself, Jim has truly dedicated his entire career to education in the humanities. As president of the North Caroliniana Society, as Sherry Paula just shared, Jim and the Society have been instrumental in providing free quality professional development to teachers and what I call the red carpet William Friday teacher retreats. Teachers who experience these retreats and interact with Jim walk away with their heads held higher, knowing that they are valued as the life-changing professionals they are. And as a former middle school teacher myself, I know how incredibly rare and yet critical that kind of appreciation is. So this opportunity to now give that back to Jim and celebrate one of my favorite people is beyond wonderful. Of course, even as we celebrate, I have to acknowledge the cloud of challenges we are facing as a state, a nation, and around the world. While it is a treat to be here at the Museum of History today, it's not quite like the reception and dinner this event normally is, because here we find ourselves amidst a global pandemic with the heartbreaking loss of life, rethinking as a society how we work and teach and what we value, still grappling with the same racial disparities that have consistently plagued our nation for centuries. In the words of the Old English ballad, made newly popular by the musical theater phenomenon Hamilton, it feels like a world turned upside down. However, it is many of these same challenges that Dr. Jim Clark has dedicated so much of his life to addressing, so it seems right and even necessary to celebrate and honor him today. As the air gets cooler with the shifting seasons here in North Carolina, it also seems right to consider the other signs of change swirling around us. Even in a time of heartbreak and turmoil, there are opportunities to transform our thinking and consider our capacity to build a better world. But how? When we are 3/4 of a year through a quarantine with pandemic fatigue hitting us all hard. I think if you asked Dr. Clark this question, he would say something in that very distinguished orator's voice of his about the answer being within us, the public, the people, with the humanities being the tool that each of us, but educators in particular, can use to excavate the solutions. The way forward is us. And by considering history, literature, philosophy, and the arts, we can better understand, if not begin to resolve, the challenges facing us. With the 7-year-old son at home, trapped, my family has been digging pretty deep in the activities for entertainment. So I recently rediscovered Jim Henson's cult classic Labyrinth, in which the wise man says to a little girl who's trapped in an ever-complicated, tangled, and seemingly endless maze, the way forward is sometimes the way back. It's a simple but powerful message. The talented composer, musician, and civil rights activist Bernice Johnson Reagan offered similar guidance in even more concrete terms when she said, if, in moving through your life, you find yourself lost, go back to the last place where you knew who you were and what you were doing and start from there. And that's because humanists, such as the ones we are honoring here today, understand that in times of crisis, communities can't just look forward. We can't just look to political leaders. We need to look to teachers and historians, writers and artists, musicians and potters and quilters and others steeped in the humanities. The humanities critically inform the times we're in. They can offer us inspiration to carry on, and perhaps they will provide the direction to move forward if we heed our historians and think of where we've been. It's what Jim Clark has espoused and worked for throughout his storied career. And so here's hoping we can all catch up with him, or at least jump on his coattails for the ride. So I'd like to start by going back to October 1963. 57 years ago, almost to the day, when novelist, playwright, poet, and activist James Baldwin gave a talk to teachers, which was later printed as an essay. If you know anything about the incredible Mr. Baldwin, you know he had a vivacious proclivity for candor over placation. So he looked at those teachers, feeling a bit nervous himself, knowing he wasn't a teacher, and he opened with, "Let's begin by saying that we are living through a very dangerous time. Everyone in one way or another is aware of that. We are in a revolutionary situation, no matter how unpopular that word has become in this country." 1963. Recall the world in which Mr. Baldwin was speaking to those teachers. A few months prior to this October talk, on June 12, 1963, legendary civil rights activist, NAACP field director, and World War II veteran Medgar Evers, only 37 years old and father to 3 young children, was shot in the back outside of his home. He wasn't shot in combat defending democracy overseas. He was shot for defending democracy here in America, his home. That same year, children peacefully protesting in the streets to integrate Birmingham were attacked and jailed. That September, 1 month before Baldwin's meeting with teachers, 4 little girls between the ages of 11 and 14, with their whole lives stretched in front of them, were killed when Klansmen bombed a Birmingham church. President John F. Kennedy would be assassinated the following month on November 22, 1963. But given all that was happening in the world in the 1950s and 1960s, Baldwin argued that the nation was upset and in turmoil not because of what was taking place on the streets in '63, but because our country was experiencing a crisis of identity, because we had yet to face the history of an inequality woven into the very aspect of America. And so now, he said, in 1963, because we have never faced this fact, we are in intolerable trouble. And who did Baldwin think had the power to make a real difference during such a tumultuous time? A time which he rightly said was deeply menaced, not from outside forces like Khrushchev, but from within. Teachers. Like Dr. Clark, Baldwin knew the power of a teacher to cultivate young minds, to ready them for civil and cultural life. He called upon the powerful role of teachers as humanists and historians to teach a liberating curriculum, to provide a learning experience that required an honest reckoning with our shared history, and to allow students to address and confront the problems that shaped their lives. Baldwin understood the importance of teaching critical thinking. He also understood what he was asking of those educators in 1963. This was risky, dangerous work, reckoning and truth-telling and empowering young folks. To any citizen of this country who figures himself as responsible, and particularly those of you who deal with the minds and hearts of young people, you must be prepared to go for broke. Or to put it another way, you must understand that in the attempt to correct so many generations of bad faith and cruelty, when it is operating not only in the classroom, but in society, you will meet the most fantastic, the most brutal, and the most determined resistance. There is no point in pretending that this won't happen. Dr. Clark can tell you that even today, many of the educators that we meet and support share many of the same fears as those educators Baldwin addressed in 1963. They worry about consequences just for teaching children to think critically, to consider diverse perspectives and primary sources that examine and highlight our shared history, which is ultimately an examination of human nature, still commonly meets resistance. Teachers are often threatened by job loss or community backlash because, sadly, it seems these are still dangerous times. It is not surprising that many of the change makers of our past and present have met fierce resistance. It's also not surprising that change makers are also typically deeply connected to the humanities. Historians, writers, poets, legal scholars, musicians, teachers, preachers, artists. In 1965, 2 years after Baldwin's talk to teachers, our nation was still in the midst of escalating racial conflict and entrenched in the arduous and controversial war in Vietnam, with anti-war protests cropping up on college campuses. It's not surprising that it is in this time that the National Endowment for the Humanities was created. Our nation felt lost, People were grasping for leadership and hope. Folks felt uncertain of the future. It was also then a world turned upside down. The NEH was born out of that time of tension and fear and struggle, but also a time that revealed optimism for change and hope. Hope, which civil rights activist, lawyer, and author Pauli Murray called a song in a weary throat. That's because history, philosophy, literature, the arts and humanities at large is where we find inspiration, a sense of greater connection to one another in our communities, the tools to try to make sense of it all, the fodder for deep thinking and imagining and deliberation and conversation. As an upperclassman at UNC Chapel Hill during this time, a handsome young Jim Clark was already well into his own journey of scholarship. He talks about how it was during those years at Carolina that the liberal arts courses he was taking started talking to one another, having a conversation with each other. He had the feeling of truly becoming educated during this time because it allowed him to explore literature and contemplate the world and understand the liberation of civil rights that was needed and occurring all around, to have meaningful conversation and discussion and exchange ideas. Jim then dedicated his whole career to ensuring students of all ages all across the state have opportunities to do the very same. I've heard Dr. Jim Clark frequently talk about the importance of meaningful discussion and conversation. He's often told teachers about one of his favorite spots, the beautiful Weymouth Center for the Arts and Humanities in Southern Pines. Weymouth is the former estate of writers James and Catherine Boyd, and it is absolutely gorgeous. I first visited Weymouth a few years ago when I had the great pleasure of seeing Jim Clark be inducted into the North Carolina Literary Hall of Fame. I should also note that the late Randall Keenan, talented author and educator and insightful James Baldwin scholar, was also inducted that day. And while our world has recently lost him way too soon, what a legacy he leaves. But when you visit Weymouth and stroll around that property, you can imagine the parties they had in the early 1900s with names like F. Scott Fitzgerald, Thomas Wolfe, Archibald MacLeish, Paul Green, and other legends who often visited what was and remains an intellectual retreat for the humanities, a place for imagining and writing, pondering, creating, and deep, deep conversation. When relaying the story of Weymouth to teachers, Jim often recounts James Boyd's untimely death in 1944, and how his friend and North Carolina playwright Paul Green wrote the introduction to Boyd's posthumous poetry collection. In that introduction, Green shares fond memories of time at Weymouth. "For 25 years, I lived near James Boyd in North Carolina," he wrote. "I knew him well, took trips with him, and sat many a night in his hospitable home and talked the darkness away." Jim asks teachers to reflect on that seemingly simple but deceptively powerful phrase, talk the darkness away. At the time of Boyd's death, like today, there was plenty of darkness. Pearl Harbor had just been bombed. America was engaged in World War II, fighting for democracy and freedom overseas, even as segregation was enforced at home. And over 100,000 Japanese American citizens were incarcerated in internment camps. McCarthyism was soon to follow. Dr. Clark presents this as a challenge to teachers. He asks them to teach the darkness away, because that's what is needed for real change. As Baldwin expressed in 1963, we need teachers and leaders and broadly educated, deeply reflective citizens, those who can apply the lessons of the past to today's problems. We need people who can talk and teach the darkness away, to reveal the truths, the choices, and the hope, too often concealed by denial, mythology, and divisive fear. We must have the courage to shine a light into all the dark corners in order to move forward. W.B. Du Bois wrote in 1935, "Nations reel and stagger on their way. They make hideous mistakes. They commit frightful wrongs. They do great and beautiful things. And shall we not best guide humanity by telling the truth about all this, so far as the truth is ascertainable?" Du Bois and Baldwin and the Boyds and Paul Green and Dr. Jim Clark help us understand that history in the humanities, with intellectuals and writers and teachers and artists as our guides, can illuminate why some societies unravel while others thrive. We need to think together, talk together, imagine together, face our shared past together, and talk and teach the darkness away together. Together. Consider the classic Moby Dick. Ishmael is tied by a monkey rope to Queequeg, a humorously perilous business for both of us, he says, as Queequeg dangles over the edge of the ship, tinkering with the whale's carcass. In that moment, Ishmael recognizes that if Queequeg gets swept away into that dark, churning ocean water, he's going with him. He contemplates, my own individuality was now merged in a joint stock company of two. Another's mistake or misfortune might plunge me into unmerited disaster and death. Ishmael goes on to realize that this situation was the precise situation of every mortal that breathes. In this exchange, as two culturally opposite men struggle to survive at sea, the author is revealing the perilous path and potentially fatal result of ignoring our shared humanity. Moby Dick was published in 1851 in a society that enslaved over 3 million people, which would grow to 4 million before chattel slavery was ended. It's during this time that Ishmael asks us to consider how our individual destiny is inextricably bound with others, how survival requires empathy. This is the fundamental purpose of the humanities. More than 100 years later, in 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. implores of us the same consideration as he pens a letter from the Birmingham jail. In a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. He had been arrested while supporting the Children's Crusade to desegregate Birmingham, where young folks from 7 and 8 to 18 years old were peacefully protesting and marching while they were met with high-pressure fire hoses, batons, and attack dogs. Throughout Dr. King's life, cut devastatingly short when he was assassinated at only 39 years old, he challenged us to imagine, to empathize, to understand on a deeper level. This is what the humanities helps us do. They make it possible for a community to approach complex problems in a more interdisciplinary way, to think together, to deliberate and engage in essential discourse, considering both where we've been, where we are, and where we want to go. Because the way forward is sometimes the way back. The humanities gives us the space and the permission to imagine. C.S. Lewis creatively encouraged us to consider this in his character of Alice. Deep in Wonderland, Alice dares refute the Queen of Hearts, telling her one can't believe in impossible things. To which the Queen very knowingly responds, I dare say you haven't had much practice. When I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Imagination and belief in impossible things seem especially necessary in today's world when we face challenging, frightening questions. We must be willing to peer into the darkness and reimagine how we teach and learn. Reimagine how we help our neighbors and ourselves stay safe and happy. Reimagine how we can care for those who fall ill or need help. Reimagine ways to overcome our unconscious and conscious biases. Reimagine what it means to finally truly face our shared history. Reimagine. A vaccine may prevent additional loss due to coronavirus, but there is no inoculation for hate, prejudice, racism, closed-mindedness, conspiracy theories, or obsession with social media echo chambers. All the things that drive us apart will still be there, vaccine or not. But what if we find the possibility in this predicament? Let the humanities guide us to find community within the chaos. Wendell Berry wrote that it may be when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And when we no longer know which way to go, we have begun our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. Challenging ourselves to stay engaged, to think critically, to ask important questions so that we can discover innovative solutions, to cultivate empathy, to gain a full perspective of where we are with the courageous rather than defensive examination of the true history of where we've been, all of which our teachers, with the help of the humanities, can nurture. This is where our hope lies. The late and absolutely incredible photographer and humanist Billy Barnes, who also, like Jim Clark, loved and appreciated teachers to his core, and joined Jim Clark and I for several times for the William Friday teacher retreats that we provide. He exemplifies this hope in so many of his photographs. One in particular comes to mind that he titled simply, Best Pals. He ironically said it was a bit of an accident, this perfect moment that he captured. He was on assignment in 1987, and he happened upon these two little boys having the time of their lives on a playground. And of course, seeing a camera, they were grinning little moths to the flames, and they come to him and they say, "Hey, we're best buddies. You should really take a picture of us together." How could he not acquiesce? So Mr. Barnes later said of this image that he wished it could hang in a hallway in every public school in the world, because to him it symbolized the undeniable fact that prejudice is a learned trait. And wouldn't it be wonderful if the kind of mutual affection seen in this photograph could flood across every level of all the societies on our planet? The humanities provide us the imagination, the connection, the empathy, the explanations, the tools to ultimately take responsibility for our history and for our communities and for our future. The late John Lewis said, together we can redeem the soul of this nation. He chose to remind us in his last words of Dr. King's belief that we are all complicit when we tolerate injustice, and that each of us has a moral obligation to stand up, and speak out. And he rightfully told us that we must study history and learn the lessons of history, because humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching existential struggle for a very long time. And of course, he fully supported each of us getting into that good trouble. Recently, after yet another battle with a 7-year-old learning from a computer screen at home and having overdosed on the news of the day, I found myself in one of those hopeless moments, completely forlorn with the state of the world, as I think we all find ourselves from time to time these days. But it was a poem. Again, inspiration from the humanities that allowed me to see things differently that day, and I'm trying to hold on to. Writer Leslie Dwight posted, "What if 2020 is the year we've been waiting for? A year so uncomfortable, so painful, so scary, so raw that this finally focuses us to grow. A year that screams so loud, finally waking us from our slumber. A year we finally accept the need for change, declare change, work for change, become the change. A year we finally band together instead of pushing each other farther apart. 2020 isn't canceled, but rather the most important year of them all." And so my hope for each of you joining us today, in honor of Dr. Jim Clark and every other humanist I've mentioned, and in honor of all educators, past and present, teach courageously and go for broke like Mr. Baldwin hoped you would. Honor W.B. Du Bois by guiding humanity through telling the truth. Look back to guide yourself forward. Believe in impossible things. Declare change, work for change, become the change, get into good trouble, and talk, or as Dr. Jim Clark would say, teach the darkness away. Thank you, and congratulations on this well-deserved award, Jim. On this day of celebration, and in a time when we can all use extra inspiration, I'm delighted to welcome back Mary D. Williams. Ms. Williams, as you've already experienced earlier, is an exceptional performer who specializes in songs and the narrative of the Black South. She's also a talented educator who was passionate about sharing not just the music she so beautifully sings, but the knowledge of the incredible culture, history, and resistance from which it emerges. She's performed all around the world, from the Kennedy Center to the state capitol, and at hundreds of colleges, universities, public schools, churches, libraries. And despite her being in constant and high demand, Mary Williams has always prioritized working with Dr. Jim Clark and I in serving teachers. She deeply appreciates teachers and believes in the power of an educator to transform lives. It's one of the reasons why she and Jim Clark became fast friends. In fact, she credits her own middle school teacher for putting her on the path of her incredible career in performance and education. and she exemplifies the power of the humanities as her voice lifts us all up and gives us hope for the future, while also providing a window to the past as she gives voice to the pain and resilience and hope of her powerful ancestors. Please welcome again Miss Mary D. Williams.
Been in the storm so long, been in the storm so long, children, been in the storm so long. Oh, I just need a little time to pray. I've been in the storm so long, been in the storm so long, children, been in the storm so long. Oh, I just need a little time to pray. Now let me tell you, brother, just how I've had to come along. Some days I'd 100. There were days I had an aching heart. Oh, I just need a little time. I just need a little time. I just need a little time to pray.
Thank you, Christy, for that moving lecture of hope, and Mary for your gift of song and inspiration. It's an honor to have both of you with us today to help celebrate Dr. Clark. To continue the celebration of our 2020 John Tyler Caldwell Award honoree, we have asked two people who know Dr. Clark very well to remark on his achievements and his impact throughout North Carolina. Sharon Rowland and Jim Alchidiak. Jim will virtually bestow our Caldwell Medal, but first, Sharon, I turn it over to you to tell us a little bit more about Dr. Clark.
Thank you to the North Carolina Humanities Council for inviting me to introduce my friend, Dr. James Clark. Jim hails from Warren County and has always remembered his rural values. He has shared his philosophy with thousands. That philosophy is that high-quality professional development always leads to great youth development. Students benefit when the people who are teaching them understand the professional skills needed to teach. Dr. Clark's engagement with NC State students was never more important than when rural boys and girls came into his classroom. He would always build rapport, saying, "You must know," and then he would name someone from the student's county. That meant success. After all, the student knew that Dr. Clark could contact someone from his or her home county. Visionary Jim Clark led NC State into creating Humanities Extension based upon the cooperative extension model. This was valuable in helping students and seniors across North Carolina learn new humanities skills. Students would develop skills in writing during summer workshops, while seniors honed in on their humanities skills in workshops in their own environment. As 4-H historian, Dr. Clark's research and documentation skills led to the development of stories through the eyes of 4-H'ers, but told through societal changes. 4-H'ers, volunteers, and professionals learned. Jim Clark's leadership inspired a team of North Carolina 4-H volunteers to create our state's 4-H History and Learning Center. Over $3 million was gifted from private sources, with much coming from alums and friends that Dr. Clark and his friends asked. He then oversaw the development of a 100-year-old collection of memorabilia, but he was wise enough to start that collection 50 years before it was needed. He also helped with the creation of a 4-H timeline talking about those 100 years. Dr. Clark's dedication to 4-H service has been noticed. He was selected to the North Carolina 4-H Hall of Fame, and he is an outstanding 4-H alum. His most significant contribution recognized him, and he was inducted into the National 4-H Hall of Fame. This opportunity is only given to the very best of the 4-H family. Dr. Clark is one of only 16 individuals from North Carolina to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. His philosophy continues. A sign at 4-H Millstone says, "You will leave this place a different person. We hope that you leave a better person." Dr. Clark has always helped the individuals with whom he worked to leave a better person. I challenge each of us to do the same and help those with whom we work to leave better people.
Thank you, Sharon. I want you all to know that before there was a World Wide Web, there was a Jim Clark Wide Web. I know this because I was a node in it, and I imagine that many of you were too. I was fortunate enough to work closely with Jim and the NCSU Humanities Extension Program beginning in the late 1980s. I came to know Jim as someone who seemed to know most everyone and led the Humanities Extension Program, often by introducing potential collaborators to one another. Of course, Jim's work was much more substantial than that, but his familiarity with a network of educators, writers, community activists, and just plain folk across the state of North Carolina always impressed me greatly. Jim's background in 4-H, his degrees from UNC and Duke, and his impressive track record as an English professor at NC State helped explain some of this breadth. But so too did his personality and natural demeanor. Education was a perfect fit for Jim Clark, I believe, because he is first and foremost a humanist. How perfectly fitting this is for the fellow who would lead our Humanities Extension program, modeled on agricultural extension, intricately tied to the 4-H program and to Jim's background growing up on his family farm, and how perfectly fitting it is for this award. I first worked closely with Jim on a series of video portraits of North Carolina writers called Talk About Writing. My advanced students were delighted and enriched as they learned intimately about North Carolina's rich literary heritage, and I know that Jim liked that part of the plan. As I insinuated myself into Humanities Extension, I was one of those faculty members who signed up for the outreach program that sent NC State faculty members into North Carolina middle school and high school classrooms for guest lectures on a given topic. The teachers and most students I met generally seemed appreciative, but I often felt that I was the one who gained most from the experience, sometimes seeing a part of the state I had never visited, and always meeting North Carolinians on their home turf, giving me insight into the lives of my own students back at NC State. And there was Jim, playing educational matchmaker through this program or any of a number of other initiatives. I was fortunate enough to be part of the team as Humanities Extension became a publications unit, creating textbooks, videos, and other ancillary materials tailored to the North Carolina course of study for middle school social science curriculum. Through years of the program's astonishing success, Jim's steady leadership kept us anchored to the task of education and service. In the process, Jim became a trusted friend, and I have to say, a mentor. I believe my own sensibility in the classroom and beyond improved due to the time I spent with you, Jim. For that, I'll always be grateful. Oh, and by the way, the people of the state of North Carolina benefited too. So now I have the honor of bestowing upon you, on behalf of the North Carolina Humanities Council, the John T. Caldwell Award for 2020. It features Chancellor Caldwell's likeness, and I must say it is a rather substantial medal. So, if you wear it at breakfast tomorrow, Jim, don't let it lean into the scrambled eggs. Congratulations, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. I thank the North Carolina Humanities Council for recognizing my career in youth development with the 2020 John Tyler Caldwell Award. Since the late 1960s, a statewide team of colleagues and I have extended humanities values and skills to young North Carolinians through both formal and informal public education. 3 organized programs have been especially important in my professional life: 4-H Youth Development and Humanities Extension publications at NC State University, plus the Carolina K-12 program of Carolina Public Humanities of UNC Chapel Hill. In retirement, I have the honor and responsibility to serve as president of the North Caroliniana Society. Its board and membership embrace Carolina K-12's professional development mission. I received a Bachelor of Arts in English at Chapel Hill and an MA and PhD in English at Duke University. Dr. Caldwell was chancellor in 1967 when I joined the faculty in English at NC State, the land-grant campus I had known as a Warren County farm youth through 4-H. I never worked anywhere else. Running throughout my career is the belief that powerful youth development is the major impact of excellent professional development of 4-H agents and volunteers as well as classroom teachers. What then do 4-H, Humanities Extension publications, and Carolina K-12 have in common? Let me stress 4 elements these programs share. Free public access to open discussion and study with options for credit or non-credit. Rigorous curricula shaped by human values based in history and science. Youth mentored and instructed by teachers or agents who interact with specialists, and cultural heritage and history transmitted through conventional means as well as modern technology. Here are selected examples of learning and doing these things. In 4-H, I volunteered as a humanities faculty member to organize shelves of images, artifacts, and official records into the 4-H collection of State's D.H. Hill Library. This work became the basis of the popular website now known as Green in Growing. I published 2 books about the history of 4-H in North Carolina and helped lead the committee that funded and established the North Carolina 4-H History and Learning Center at Millstone 4-H Camp in Richmond County. In Humanities Extension publications, I developed and led humanities seminars about literary history with special emphasis on North Carolina writers. I collaborated with these authors and videographers to produce videos for use in seminars, classrooms, and on public television. Living in Our World, our social studies textbook series for grades 4 through 8, prospered in the 1990s, as did summer writing and reading 4-H camps at the county level. I also assumed leadership roles in literary organizations such as the Thomas Wolfe Society, the Paul Green Foundation, and the NC Literary Hall of Fame, as I taught life writing workshops and library classes in Encore, Ollie, and in continuing care and senior living facilities across the Triangle. Carolina K-12 and Carolina Public Humanities, as Christy Henson Norris has explained, have enjoyed the generous financial support of the North Caroliniana Society in recent years. This collaboration provides classroom teachers top-notch professional development to inspire and sustain students across the state. Among the many benefits of this joint commitment is the recent increase in free online and digital curriculum resources that comprise in our time an electronic resource that expensive textbooks once provided. In 1992, I edited the novella entitled The Lost Boy by Thomas Wolfe for the UNC Press. I chose this short work because it would be attractive to young readers while it also embodied Wolfe's beliefs and values as a humanist. Chief among his life lessons is this: the dreams of youth are the promises of our lives. Through 4-H, Humanities Extension publications, and Carolina K-12, I and my committed colleagues have challenged our youth to dream big and bold for themselves and for us. I wish each of you the joy of their success.
Dr. Clark, congratulations. We are so honored to have you join our prestigious list of Caldwell laureates that spans 30 wonderful years. Here are a few people who want to say congratulations.
Hello, I'm Andy Caldwell, one of John Caldwell's 2 sons. I'm happy to congratulate Dr. James Clark Jr. for being this year's recipient of the North Carolina Humanities Council Caldwell Award. From Dr. John's family to Dr. Jim and his family, congratulations. 30 years is a long time to give an award. Over the years, the recipients of the Caldwell Award are as varied, sometimes and different, as the general population. However, all recipients share some common traits, as most all people do. Some of those traits are a pursuit of learning and, of course, a genuine concern for the human condition and the betterment of that condition. Dr. James Clark Jr. certainly fits that description. And on top of that, he's a Wolfpacker. So Dr. Clark, I look forward to meeting you in person soon. And until then, congratulations.
I first met Jim about 5 years ago through his role as president of the North Caroliniana Society, and I've been learning from him ever since we met. Jim has given extraordinary service to the people of North Carolina through his commitment to public education. He was active in outreach activities during his long career as a faculty member at North Carolina State University, but his service to the humanities has become even more important amid the political and cultural challenges of recent years. Jim understands that a democratic society depends on strong public education. Citizens must know the history of our state and nation, and they must understand the insights that come from literature and the arts. The civic health of our society depends on humanistic knowledge. The John Tyler Caldwell Award for the Humanities is therefore the perfect honor for Jim Clark. He represents the values that Dr. Caldwell also promoted during his long career of service to public education. Jim is a great human being. He's also a great advocate for the humanities, and he's a great friend of public education. I celebrate Jim's distinguished service to others, and I congratulate him as he receives this special honor from the North Carolina Humanities Council. The public humanities are better and stronger in our state because of Jim's lifetime commitments to the people and teachers of North Carolina. Thanks to you, Jim Clark, for all that you do for all of us.
Jim and I served together as co-chairs of the North Carolina Freedom Monument Project for several years. And I was a member of the Paul Green Foundation when he served as its president. In fact, I suspect that there are very few literary or civic organizations of any significance in this state that Jim Clark has not belonged to, been president of, and been honored by. His generosity and humility are as extraordinary as his leadership. Jim's most recent book on his hometown of Vaughn surely should be regarded as a treasured classic of North Carolina literature. After reading it, I thought of what Howard Thurman meant when he wrote that a person must be at home somewhere before they can be at home everywhere. The depth and breadth of Jim's humanity and intellect have made him at home all over the literary and educational landscape of this state. Congratulations on this well-deserved recognition, my friend.
It's both a privilege and a pleasure to join in this salute, and thank you to Jim Clark for his many, many contributions, his lifetime of service to the humanities in North Carolina. As you know, Jim was an award-winning teacher for many, many years at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, where he also headed the Humanities Extension Service, a program that had an impact all across our state and encouraged the study and appreciation of humanities in every hamlet around North Carolina. Jim has also been one of the most effective and active leaders in various organizations, ranging from the North Carolina Writers Conference, the North Carolina Literary and Historical Association, the North Carolina Literary Hall of Fame, the Thomas Wolfe Society. He's president of the North Caroliniana Society. He has been active in so many groups and connected with so many people. I've sometimes referred to him as kind of the Johnny Appleseed of the humanities in North Carolina. Like Johnny Appleseed, who nurtured seedlings and spread seeds for apples around the country, Jim has done that with the humanities. He has more contacts across the state than I think just about anybody I know with people who are active in education and in the humanities and the literary arts. He's a modest person. You won't often find him in the spotlight. He's going to somehow maneuver so that the attention goes to others. So I'm really delighted that the Humanities Council is putting him in the spotlight today, and I want to congratulate him on receiving the Caldwell Award for 2020. Jim, from one country boy to another, let me remind you or point out to you, this is the first time since a march that I have put on a tie and coat, but I have done it as one country boy saluting another. As the saying would go, you done all right, and we thank you.
Congratulations, Dr. James Clark, Jr., on receiving the 2020 Caldwell Award for the Humanities. I'm Chuck Caldwell, one of John's sons. On behalf of John, the Caldwell family, and friends of the humanities everywhere, we thank you for your contributions to the understanding and chronicling of the human condition. Please know that John would be proud to have you among the Caldwell Award recipients. Thank you.
Hi, Jim. Congratulations from Eastern North Carolina. This is my third opportunity to express publicly my overwhelming gratitude to you for, put simply, being who you are, one of the most enthusiastic and knowledgeable advocates for North Carolina's rich literary history. This honor, among your many others, is hard-earned and well-deserved. I was so fortunate that you began to share your expansive knowledge of North Carolina's literary luminaries with me so quickly after I became NCLR editor almost 25 years ago. You introduced me to writers, or if they were no longer with us, to their work, and you directed scholars to send their literary coups to my attention. It wasn't too long before I began turning to you for professional advice, and you have never failed to provide answers and support. Thank you, and again, congratulations.
Thank you, everyone. You all are very thoughtful, and I thank you for your kind words. And thank you again to the North Carolina Humanities Council for this award.
On behalf of the North Carolina Board of Trustees, it is my extreme pleasure to congratulate Jim today on this well-deserved award. His advocacy of public humanities throughout his career has certainly enriched the citizenry of North Carolina, and this civic benefit is one of the Council's most fervent principles in our mission of telling the story of North Carolina peoples. My thanks go to all of our speakers, sponsors, and guests who have helped to celebrate Jim's story and have made this virtual program so memorable. Jim, again, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, thank you for your dedication and commitment to our state. You truly embody what this award stands for and are a living representation of the power that the humanities has to transform and inform our communities. To all of our viewers, we know that you staunchly support the humanities by your recognition of Jim Clark's work. We hope that this signal celebration of Jim's accomplishments offers further inspiration and excitement about the power of the humanities in our world and its role in spreading understanding and crafting a more equitable, just, and inclusive future. Thank you, and on behalf of the North Carolina Humanities Council Board and staff, be well.
Yes, we want our freedom. Yes, we want our freedom, children. Yes, we want our freedom. We want our freedom, and we want it now. Yes, we want our freedom. Yes, we want our freedom, children. Yes, we want our freedom. We want our freedom, and we want it now. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. Before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. No more moaning, no more moaning, no more moaning over me. Before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.